Welcome to Methodcast, your cozy corner for quiet truth telling, compassionate insight, and deep reflection. This is the podcast that's here to help you break free from porn, the easy peasy way. No guilt, no struggle, just a new perspective that makes quitting feel natural. Because real freedom isn't about giving something up, it's about gaining back everything porn has taken from you. Today's episode is a vulnerable one. We're talking about something that's been quietly shaping lives behind closed doors, wrapped in silence and coated with a sense of normalcy: porn. Specifically, we're exploring the widespread belief that porn is socially acceptable, even healthy, and why the easy peasy method says, hold on, maybe it's not so harmless after all. Now, let's begin with the way porn sits in the modern cultural narrative. It's everywhere, woven into movies, jokes, memes, even our vocabulary. If you say you watch porn, the usual response might be a shrug, a chuckle, maybe even a high five. It's seen as something private but not shameful, a normal outlet for sexual expression. Even health professionals, magazines, and influencers sometimes package it as self-care or a way to blow off steam. And this framing, that it's totally fine, even encouraged, gives users a feeling of being safe in their habits. But here's the first crack in that illusion. If it's so normal and healthy, why does it always happen in secret? Why do users feel a need to close the door, wait until everyone's asleep, clear their browser history, use private mode? Why is there often a lingering sense of shame afterward, a weight in the chest, a subtle emptiness? The easy peasy method takes a hard but loving look at that gap between what society says about porn and what users actually experience. It says, just because something is common doesn't mean it's natural, just because something is normalized doesn't mean it's harmless, and just because people laugh about it doesn't mean they're free from it. Porn is often framed as a personal choice, a harmless pleasure, but Easy Peasy argues that it's much more than that. It's isolating. It's not a shared joy. It's not something you invite a loved one into with you. It's solitary. It's hidden. It's detached from warmth and connection. It's a moment of lust disguised as release, but underneath it's loneliness wearing a mask. Let's sit with that for a moment. Loneliness wearing a mask, because that's what so many users experience. They might not even recognize it at first. They might watch casually, regularly, sometimes mindlessly, but over time they start to feel a little more removed from others, a little more distracted during conversations, a little more disconnected in their relationships, a little less willing to engage emotionally. Why does that happen? Because porn rewires how we relate to intimacy. It teaches the brain to associate sexual satisfaction with screens, pixels, and fantasy, not with eye contact, vulnerability, or real human energy. And the more you train your brain in that direction, the harder it becomes to find joy in real, slow, imperfect love. Real intimacy starts to feel too slow, too awkward, too demanding. So the user retreats further into their virtual world, not out of choice, but because their capacity to connect has quietly eroded. The easy peasy method calls this the illusion of pleasure. Porn gives you a spike. It hijacks the reward system with novelty, with lust, with instant gratification. But what follows that spike? Usually a crash, a sense of distance, of having stepped out of your own body. That's the cost of that so-called harmless pleasure. And when you multiply that cycle, spike, crash, shame, over months or years, the long-term effects become painfully clear. Users often start to avoid intimacy, not because they don't want it, but because it feels complicated compared to porn. Porn doesn't require vulnerability. It doesn't demand presence. It doesn't ask for patience or empathy or growth. It's a quick fix, but that fix comes at the cost of your emotional range. This is what easy peasy means when it says porn is isolating. It doesn't just happen in solitude, it creates solitude. It makes it harder to bond. It chips away at confidence. It floods the mind with unrealistic expectations. And most painfully, it feeds the belief that you're not worthy of real connection. And here's something not often talked about: the emotional weight of secrecy. Porn use is often wrapped in silence. Even the so-called casual users tend to keep it private. It's not something most people bring up over coffee with friends. And that silence builds a wall. The user might not be lying, but they're hiding. And what starts as privacy quickly becomes isolation. That isolation begins to seep into other areas of life. People become more irritable, less patient, more emotionally shut down, more avoidant. They may start to feel like they're living two lives: the outer self who appears fine, and the inner self who's quietly spiraling. And that fragmentation is exhausting. Now let's talk about lust. And what Easy Peasy suggests is its deeper impact. Lust, when distorted through the lens of porn, becomes more than just desire. It becomes consumption. It becomes objectification. It trains the user to see people as bodies, not souls, to seek thrill, not connection. And worst of all, it turns sex into something that happens to someone, not with someone. This lust-driven perception isn't limited to porn itself. It leaks. It colors how users look at others in real life. It interrupts emotional availability. It places fantasy above reality. And that fantasy is addictive, not just for the dopamine, but for the control. In porn, the user never has to compromise, never has to show up emotionally, never has to risk rejection. But real love requires all of those things. And so, little by little, porn users start to fear the very thing they crave most: connection. What makes this cycle especially cruel is that most users don't realize it's happening. They tell themselves, it's just a video now and then. Everyone does it. But meanwhile, they feel more anxious in relationships, more numb to joy, more detached from the present moment. And because society tells them it's normal, they assume the problem must be them. But the truth is simpler and kinder. It's not you. It's the illusion. It's the promise of porn that never delivers. It says, just one more session and you'll feel better. But you never do. You feel emptied out, spiritually, emotionally, energetically. And yet there is such hope in this realization. Because once you see the illusion for what it is, you no longer have to fight it. You don't have to shame yourself. You don't have to wrestle your urges forever. You just need to understand that you're not missing anything. Letting go of porn isn't giving up a pleasure. It's coming home to your full capacity for love. It's rediscovering joy that doesn't come in jolts and crashes, but in waves of calm, connection, and real presence. It's restoring your confidence, not the puffed up kind, but the quiet kind that says, I'm here and I'm whole. And guess what happens when the secrecy drops? When the isolation lifts, when the lust clears, you become more you than you've ever been. You speak more openly, you feel more fully, you love more bravely. And slowly, the narrative that porn is normal starts to feel laughably small, not because you're judging others, but because you've tasted something better. You've experienced what life feels like when it's lived from the inside out, not chased through a screen. So wherever you are on this journey, whether you're watching daily, occasionally, or not at all, know that freedom doesn't come from white-knuckling. It comes from seeing, from choosing clarity over confusion, connection over consumption, love over lust. And the best part? You don't have to wait until you crash. You can choose that clarity now. You can choose to step out of the fog and say, I'm ready to live differently. I'm ready to be present. I'm ready to be free. Thank you for joining me in this space today. I hope this episode of Methodcast felt like a quiet breath of truth in a world full of noise. Until next time, stay grounded, stay kind to yourself, and remember, you were made for connection, not consumption. You were made for love. Please give a like, share the Methodcast with a friend, or leave a comment. Healing grows when we talk about it. Keep going, keep growing. And know that your freedom isn't just possible, it's already on its way.